Yeah.
We're gonna have three sections in this training. The first is about why would you want to have a global grant? And some of you may be here thinking, well, I came to this training, but I'm not sure why I'm here. And that may be the most important thing for you. Second, we're going to talk about how you design the project, because you have to have a project before you can apply for a grant. That's one of the first things that I'll try to convince you, is that you don't start with the application and figure out how you're going to get money and then worry about what the project is. You got to have the project first. So defining a project, that's a big chunk of this, and then completing the application. We're going to spend some time just looking at the application, and I sent you a copy of the application itself, so you might have, if you have that printed out, you might be able to follow along. So what I want you to do now is tell me which of these you're most interested in. So Greg, can you launch that one? And you can vote for more than one.
Yeah, this is, you see it, Jim?
Yep, I see it.
Okay. All right, I'm going to end the poll.
Okay, that's got most of you. All right, that's interesting. Okay, so not so much on why be involved, and we'll go through that quickly. But a few people are interested in it, so we'll try to cover that. Okay, now let's see if I can share again. I'm going to get used to this after a while. Okay. All right, so why do a global grant? Building peace is one of the reasons, and it's pretty important in our world today. We've had 3 global grants that are positive peace workshops that we've been involved in. 2 of those in Mexico, actually it's 4 if you count the one in Colombia, 2 in Mexico, 1 in Colombia, and 1 in the US that we just completed this year. We're closing up that grant right now. And those are primarily training, but there are other peace grants that are just as important, sometimes more so. Saving lives. We've done a lot of stuff with kidney transplants and pacemakers and teaching midwives in Mexico. We have had a lot of impact, and if you get involved in global grants, you can be part of that. It's really heartwarming. You get to meet the beneficiaries, and this is really fun. These are people related to that kidney transplant program in Mexico, and it's really great to meet the beneficiaries. And that's one of the things that I like the most about global grants, is meeting people that are significantly different from you that you can help. There are really some wonderful things that happened, and this is one of the ones that I like to highlight, because Oak Ridge had a global grant in Ghana, and they developed this health center. And one of the things they had to do was get all of the tribal chiefs in the area to support it. And so they got them together, and they all agreed that they were going to support the health center. And that was probably one of the most significant, in the long run, one of the most significant accomplishments of the project. It's getting all of the tribal chiefs to work together. Basic education is really important, and we're building a school in Uganda. It's close to finish now, this kind of thing happens other parts of the world too. Actually, I think this basic school probably isn't available anymore, but it was for several years. We didn't build enough of them for the Rotary Foundation to get that excited about it. And we have projects in the U.S. and we call these reverse global grants because we're bringing the grant into the U.S. In Kentucky, we're doing a water and sanitation project. In Illinois, we're doing an anti-bullying program. And this Rotaract Positive Peace workshop that we're just finishing up, our district was the sponsor, and it affected everybody in our zones, Rotaractors all over our zones, and in a couple of other zones too. So a lot of good reasons to do this, but I want everybody to think about what things you've done and stick in the chat what country you worked in, what area of focus, and did you have fun? And I think it's important for us all to just take a second and look at it and realize all the places that we're having impact. A lot of you said you had some experience with global grants. So everybody stick something in the chat if you got something, and I'll keep going just so that we are conscious of everybody's time. Okay, so what do you really get out of it? In-depth understanding, really understanding a problem in another country much more than you do when you just contribute to something. If you're really involved, you're gonna really understand what's going on. You can have significant impact. Global grants are a lot larger than other things we do, like with district grants, and so you can have a lot more impact. And it's really fun. I think global grants are fun because they're always there. You always have little surprises, and that's part of getting to know people that are in another country and work on something that's a little bit far from your comfort zone. And anyway, it's a lot of fun. Okay, so any questions about that? That's the end of part one. We went through that pretty fast. That's why you want to be involved. Anybody who doesn't want to be involved, all right, have I convinced you all? Okay, moving right along. What does it take to make a global grant become reality? This is, before you do the grant, you've got to have a project. And so this is about defining and designing your project. And a lot of people start here. My club wants a global grant, but we don't know where to start. Okay. And the answer to that question is you find a project, and you have to find a project overseas. And if you really don't know where to start, a lot of times you look at the application and you say, oh gosh, this looks really complicated. It's got a lot of stuff in there. I don't know the answer to any of those questions. And so you just kind of put it aside. And that's why I say, don't start with the application. You start with a project, and it's not that hard to figure out how you can get a project and develop it into something that then you can put a grant around. Okay, so the easiest way to do it is to join another project. You can find a club that's developing a global grant. And so that happens all over the world. There are people developing global grants because they've got the need, and you can find them and join them. It might be a club overseas that has a project, but it needs a partner. Because when you do a global grant, you always have to have an international partner. And so if you come with some money and our district can help you with money, then you can be a very important piece of the puzzle for that project overseas. You can also help to fund or support global grants that have been developed by others, like Heart to Heart. The Heart to Heart program, and I know Ron Apoon is on here today. The Heart to Heart program is a large program between our zones in the heart of America and District 4170 in the heart of Mexico, there in Mexico City. And and we do maybe 8 global grants a year. And so all of the districts in our zone get a chance to sign up to sponsor one of those grants, and you get to be involved in putting it together and watching it go forward. And several clubs in our district have done that. Probably 5 or 6, I would guess, clubs have been the international partner for one of the Heart to Heart global grants.
Hey, Jim, we've got 2 things here on. Ron says Jim can tell us about our participation in a new global grant in Arizona for clean water on a Navajo reservation, which would answer the question from Janet Johnson in Chattanooga. If you always have to have an overseas partner, how does the U.S. located grant qualify? How do you get qualified? How do you get someone to give money to us?
Yeah, you always have to have one of the things about doing a lot of projects in Mexico with Heart to Heart is that when we want to do a project here, they will become our international partner and support us. And you always do have to have somebody outside of the host country. So if we're going to do a project in the U.S., then we can be one of our clubs, or our district could be the host club or district. But then you have to have an international club or district. And the easiest way to do that is if you have done projects overseas, you ask them to reciprocate, and you'd be surprised. They all love to reciprocate. And they may not have a lot of money, but they have enough to make the grant work. And that's the way that works. Ron mentioned the Navajo project. It's a water project for people on the Navajo reservation who live in a remote area, and you can't drill wells there because the water table is contaminated, at least the shallow water table. So this project puts in a little water system where water is brought by a truck, and it fills it up about once a month. It fills up their tank, and that's enough to last them for the month. And it has a little a pump and a solar panel to run the pump so that they get water in their house. And it's a really fascinating project. You might not think that in the US we have people who don't have water. Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of people in the US who don't have water. And a lot of people who don't have sanitation.
Yeah, Jim, in following up on that, how do you get involved with global grants? Jim Goodrich from Crossville Noon says, looking for partners, attend district and international Rotary conferences for job fairs. So,
yep, there are job fairs that are virtual, and there are job fairs that are in person, where you go to the country, and all of the people who have projects, they come together to show off their projects. So it's pretty easy to find partners that way. I also have a couple of references here. One of them is a link to Heart, and the other one is a website called Matching Grants. That's not run by Rotary. It was formed by one of the districts in the U.S. And it's just a place where people can list their matching grant if they're looking for a partner or some financial help or something like that. And so you'll find maybe 50 global grants in there that are looking for partners. Okay, so here's we talked about Heart to Heart, and District 4170 is our partner there. This relationship's been going on like 14 years, and we do 8 to 10 grants, about $1 million a year in total projects. We have this annual pilgrimage in November, and I know it was canceled last year, and I think it was canceled again this year. Ron, you can confirm that. But anyway, it's I've been several times, and it's a great trip if you ever get a chance to go. Okay, so if you've joined something and been involved, then describe that project and say what you got out of it. again, you can put this in the chat because people are interested in examples, and we get a lot from the examples that that people can put in. My club did a matching grant in Haiti when we were brand new. Our club was only a year old when we started the process, and we repaired water wells in Haiti. That was a precursor to global grants, and it was a little smaller. It was only about $28,000, I think. You have to be at least $35,000 to be a global grant. But it was much like a global grant. We had to have an international partner, and we traveled a lot, and it was fascinating. I could tell stories all day about all the things we did in Haiti, repairing water wells. So you do get things that personally help you, that help a lot of other people. And anyway, so stick your input in the chat, and we'll keep going. Okay, and then some of us are going to say this, well, that's all nice, so I can go join other things, but we want to have our own project. Okay, and so if you want to have your own project, realize that there is some work involved. You need to be persistent. You need to make a lot of contacts. You need to do a community assessment. That's not that hard, but you have to do it. Talk to the RI staff member and get some inside information about what's happening. Be ready to write a grant and be disappointed when it comes back with questions. It always comes back with questions. They got a whole stack of questions. They'll pick 3 out for you and send them. Anyway, I don't mean to be flippant. Everybody gets questions, absolutely. And if you're diligent and you push it all the way through, it's just amazing when you get to the end. It really is. And it may take a couple of years. There may be some stopping along the way and restarting. That's all part of the process. It's great fun. Okay, find a team of people in your club who really want to do international service. You don't want to do it by yourself. This isn't a one-person job. And so you want to have several people. You want to find a project you can get excited about. You don't want to start the application until you know what you want to do. Think about fundraising projects and how you're going to fund it. And the district will help you a lot in funding. We'll talk about that some more later. Okay, this is, I think, one of the most important things. If you go into it backwards, you let the funding define your project. Oh, well, what's the smallest size global grant I can have? Well, it's about $35,000, okay? And so if you go out looking for a $35,000 project, you're doing this the wrong way. You want to go find a project and then get the funding for it. And believe it or not, bigger projects are easier to fund than small ones. And that's because other districts have what we call district designated funds, funds that they will put on our projects, but they won't do it for little ones. They want to put it on ones that look important. So bigger projects attract more funding. And so we need big projects, Rotary does, to be successful. And Rotary always tells you, if you have a global grant, don't just get out there and bunt. Try to hit the ball out of the park. You want to do a project that really solves a problem. And so you can define a scope that you can still chew on, and you might need more partners in order to do it, but bigger projects are very important, and they're easier to fund, and they're a lot of fun. So that's my advice is, don't worry about the price tag. We'll worry about that later. You do have to worry about it sometime. Okay, now when you develop your own project, you got these 6 questions. This is just to get you the basics of your project. Where's it going to be? Who's involved? What is it that you're going to do? What's the area of focus of what you're going to do? What are the goals? And then a summary. And we're going to run through these things. where is your project? How do you find the place where the project is? And I'm going to assume, because 95% of our projects are 95% of our projects are overseas, and they're humanitarian projects, that's the kind that we're going to talk about. There are a couple of other types, but anyway, that's the most common one is humanitarian project. So if you have a traveler, then you got a chance to find Rotarians, find projects, find needs in another country. That doesn't mean that somebody who goes on vacation to Cancun every year is going to come back with a project, but he might if he gets off of Cancun, and gets into Mexico. You might very well find a Rotary Club and a project. But if you're sitting on the beach, you're not going to find it. If you don't have a traveler, then think about other ways, other travelers, and other ways you can travel with others, like churches. All of our towns have churches, places of worship, and they have missionaries overseas and places that they support, and they have groups which go to those places all the time. Now, that doesn't mean that if they're building a church in Honduras, that becomes our project, because we wouldn't do a global grant to build a church. But the community around the church might need water, or might need something else like that. It could be something medical, or one of the other focus areas. It could be environmental, and so you can travel with that group, or you can just start to interview the people that are there, that are traveling, about what is going on in that country. And there's a couple of really good things about working with a church that or an organization like that goes overseas. You have somebody that's always going. So members of your club don't always have to go in order to see what's going on the ground. And that's a big advantage. So nonprofit organizations are much the same. When we started in Haiti, we started working with a nonprofit that's based in Chattanooga, but they do all of their work in Haiti, the Children's and Nutrition Program of Haiti. And so they were the ones who told us, well, we got all these water wells and they're all failing. That's not good for all these kids we're trying to help. And so we thought that was something we might do. And we made a couple of trips to Haiti to figure out how to solve that problem. Anyway, so talking to churches, nonprofits, other Rotary clubs, if there's a Rotary club that has a project and they're going to, let's say, Ghana every year to do something, you might talk to them about what are the things that you haven't been able to do. And you might say, well, can I piggyback with you and go the next time you travel, so I don't have to travel alone? You could introduce me to people and I could ask them about other needs. And that would be a way that you could start to find what your project is. Group study exchange. You remember group study exchange? This is where a bunch of people go to another country and study something. And it used to be mostly vocational. And it doesn't have to be. Now you can fund it with a district grant, and you could have a team of people who are going to go to a particular country just to look for global grant opportunities. And so you can fund that with a district grant and get it half paid for that way. So any questions about that? A lot of ways to find a place to do a project. Okay, now you got to find a sponsor in the host country. You want to figure out what's the best one to partner with. You want a club that's active and experienced. If you've got a country where there's a lot of projects and you've got a Rotary club you're thinking about working with and they haven't done any projects, that's not necessarily a good sign. They should have some experience with grants. They should be willing to work with your club, and they ought to accept a balanced relationship. Some problems occur because the club in the other country wants to do everything, and they don't want you to be involved. And you wanted to get involved in the first place, or you wouldn't be here. And others want you to do it all. They don't really want to be involved. They want to rubber stamp it, and they want the international partner to do the project. And Rotary really wants us all to work on it. And part of the advantage of a global grant is that you get two clubs that work together on the project. So you have to make sure they're district and club qualified, and we can help you with that. Because just like you're getting qualified by going to a seminar like this one, they have to do something in their district. It's not necessarily the same thing that we do here. And then from the very beginning, build a personal relationship. Start to get to know the people. And when I say personal relationship, I mean, you really need to know who they are. You know, I mean, how many kids? What are their names? What's going on? If you can answer those kinds of questions, so you know what's happening in the lives of your partners, then you're going to have a much better time developing the project, writing a grant, getting the project done. Okay, now you got to find project areas. You've got a country and you've got a Rotary Club. What other kinds of projects are going on in the country? That might be something that would tell you where the needs are. You can ask local officials if they have a needs assessment, and I've seen that if you go to a local government official and you ask him, what do you think are the biggest needs in your area? 9 times out of 10, he'll say, you know, nobody ever asked me that, but I've been waiting for you. And he doesn't have the means to fix it, but he knows what the needs are. And so it could be now he might say, what I need is a hospital. And you'll find out pretty quickly that we can't use global grant funds to build a hospital. But if he has a hospital and he needs equipment, you can use a global grant to put the equipment in the hospital. So the clubs might have ideas, both your club and the other, and you want to do something that fits with your club. If you got a club full of engineers, you might want to do something mechanical. If you got a club full of people that are more social workers, you might want to do something that's a little more personal about working with people. And so look for a population in need, because that can really focus what you have. I know there are people who have gone to another club and the club says, well, I don't know what we ought to do, but I do know that there's a neighborhood that's got a lot of refugees in it. They've come here from somewhere else, and I know they've got a lot of needs. And so we can go there and see what their biggest needs are. And then there are community health committees. And if you're in a community that you think you want to work in, talk to the health committee. They're a very good source for the things that they need. So from this, you might find a project area. Then you want to talk about beneficiaries, and Rotary and the foundation, we're always asking about the beneficiaries. Beneficiaries are people. And some people make the mistake of saying, well, I found this organization and they work in that country and they need some help and we want to help them. So they're the beneficiary, but that's not right. The organization isn't the beneficiary, it's the people they're helping. And you need to focus on those people and think about counting them. If you can't count them, if you just say, oh, there's a lot of people out there, then you're not quite close enough to them. You need to be able to, I mean, not exactly, but if there's 500 people, you need to know there's 500 people. And of those 500 people, you need to know how many of them would benefit from what you're talking about doing. So you need to be able to count them. And then you need to figure out what they need the most. And you can do that by asking them. And there are different ways of doing assessments. You can do assessments by asking other people. Okay, so perform a community assessment. You work with that local club. You involve the community health groups and governments. You consider both assets and needs. When part of an assessment, you're looking for strengths as well as weaknesses. And that's important because, for example, you might find that this area has a really strong community health committee. And if they have a lot of influence over what happens, then they're going to be much more successful in getting the local population to accept what you're trying to change. So that's a really important asset. You don't want to overlook it. And there are other assets that are out there too. And then when you've got a needs list, you can select a project, get something near the top of the list, but it needs to be something that's interesting to the clubs and something that's not too big a project. It needs to be something that's with a time period where you think you could handle it. You might need special expertise, and you're going to want to find that early if you do. You're going to be working in a foreign language. You better have somebody who speaks it, right? When my club was working in Haiti, we worked with this NGO, which had people on the ground who spoke Haitian Creole. And so we could talk to them in English and they would communicate with all the people. That was really important. We couldn't have done it without them. Look for examples of success. Make sure you're aligned with one of the 6 focus areas. Oh, there's 7. I didn't change this slide. There's 7 now. Okay, the community assessment can also be covered by a district grant. And down here in the lower right-hand corner, we have the form. If you've got this, you can click there and it'll download the form from the Rotary website. Okay, now we get to areas of focus. So there's 7 of these now. And they're called focus areas because the trustees focus them. You say water and sanitation, but it's not everything related to water and sanitation. And the trustees focus it because they have to have a balance between the number of projects they have and the amount of money they have. And so they try to keep the areas similar enough so that we can learn from other projects, and also so that they can count how much success we've had working in this area of focus. So the area of focus policy statements are really important. And it has, in the policy statements, it has a need, well, let me just show you one so you can see how that works. Here's the 7 areas of focus: peace building, disease prevention and treatment, water, sanitation and hygiene, maternal and child health, basic education and literacy, community economic development, and environment. And so you can work on all of those. You can work on one of those. One of those often impacts others. It's best to just pick one. You don't always just pick one, but it's best if you just pick one. And I'll explain why. Water and sanitation, for example. If you improve the water supply, you may say, and it's true, that has an impact on disease. And so I could say I'm in this area of focus, but I'm also in disease prevention. And I can say it also helps maternal and child health. And so it's also in child health. But if you say you're going to do a project in maternal and child health, then one of the first things the application is going to ask you is, what's the current fatality rate for young mothers, either in childbirth or in the first year after childbirth? And you might not know that. And the second thing they're going to ask you is, how much are you going to improve it with your water project? And you might not know that. But if you go back to the goals for water, you'll be able to say, yes, I'm really working on those goals. And that's why it's easier to pick one that's really what you're focusing on, even though it does have impact on the others. And you might put that in your verbiage somewhere, but in the long run, you're going to end up focusing on one. Sometimes with a big project, you'll have 2, and that's okay. But you're going to have to address both of them. Okay, so here's an area of focus, statement of purpose and goals, and this is what you get when you go to that area of focus guidelines. The first line here The Rotary Foundation enables Rotarians to ensure communities sustainable access to water, sanitation, hygiene. That's the statement of purpose. And then the 5 things underneath it, those are goals. And so facilitating universal, equitable access to safe, affordable drinking water. That's a mouthful, but they've rewritten that a couple of times, because if you put it in as not affordable, that's not universal, right? Some people won't be able to get the water. And if you put it in and it only, let's say if it's in a school, and so you're going to provide water for the school, but there's no water outside, almost always you'll find a way to have some water that's available outside the school. So it's more universal, more equitable, the water that you're providing. So you go through these goals, and what I like to suggest is that you take these policy statements for all 7 areas of focus and go through with a yellow highlighter and just read all of these things. And when you see something that says, my project's going to do that, highlight it. And after you've done this, it'll take you maybe half an hour to go through all of the goal statements. And now just flip through the pages and see where all the yellow spots are. The highlighter is going to tell you which area of focus you're in, okay? Because that's the one where you're accomplishing the goals. Okay, so we talked about these steps: location, partner, beneficiaries, project, area of focus, and goals. You don't have to do them in this order. Somebody will say, well, we're going to start in Honduras because we've got a lot of friends who are working there and we want to go to Honduras. Okay, and so you start with location, but somebody else might start with a partner because somebody came from another club and they visited us and we got to know them, and wherever they are, we're going to go where that partner is. And that will immediately determine your location, but you really started based on the partner, not the characteristics of the location. So you could start with any of these and work around to the others. It's generally not a good idea to select your project first and then go out finding the people who need it. But you don't have to do them in the order that I showed them to you. So review them as you go and go through them all again. Once you think you have all of this in place, go back around and make sure that it's all aligned. That where you talk about beneficiaries and needs, the needs are related to the project you've selected and the area of focus you've selected, and all of it fits together. And then you're ready for the last step. Define your project. And what I suggest is you try to write a 2-sentence summary. Some people will start by telling their story. And they start with, once upon a time, a member of our club was on vacation in Central America, and he happened on a Rotary meeting. And that's not really what you want to do here. Don't start with once upon a time. Start with taking all of those little pieces and trying to squeeze them into 2 sentences. So the Rotary clubs of Butuan, Philippines, and Jefferson City West, Missouri, will partner with Global Action Platform, that's a cooperating organization, to provide community and economic development training for an initial 30,000 indigenous people in the Caraga region of the Philippines. This project is the first stage in a long-term program to provide these same skills and knowledge to about 1 million indigenous people. This is a big deal. And it's a pretty big project. It's about $280,000. And it's probably going to take them 3 or 4 years. They thought it was going to be really fast, and then COVID hit. And so it really slowed things down. But the foundation says, just keep on going. This is a great project. And so this is what happens when you get out there and you really swing for the fences. You know, this is the kind of thing you can do, and you get the right partners, and it can really go. Okay, so Anybody can write something like this. And if you have trouble squeezing it into 2 sentences and it keeps getting 2 pages long, give me a call. I'll help you. You just pick out the key things and put them in there. If you can't, it's like an elevator speech. If you can't make an elevator speech, then maybe you don't really know what you're trying to do. So, okay. So any questions about that? That's part 2. That's the definition, defining a project. Everybody all right?
Yeah, I don't see anything in chat, Jim.
Oh, if you, I can't see everybody because I'm looking at my screen. But Greg, are you looking at everybody? If you raise your hand on the down at the bottom, one of your options is to raise your hand. Then that'll move you up to the top, so Greg will see you if you've got a question. But you can also put it in the chat.
Yeah, I don't see anything in chat right now, or no one's got their hands raised. So.
Okay, well, I hope you got what you wanted out of that, and you'll get a copy of the slides, and you can go through this yourself as many times as you want. Okay, it's time for a short break, and when we come back, I want to go over the application, and I want to, if you have it printed out, then bring the application template, because we're going to talk about that as we go through it.
So what time do you want people back, Jim?
Oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes. How about that? Okay. I'll stay here, and if people have questions or you just want to talk, then we can do that.
Okay, we'll start up at 7:25 officially, but if you want to hang around and ask Jim questions, you're free to do that.
Okay. I'll stop share so I can see people.
Right.
There's also the cadre is helpful for that kind of thing.
Jim, you see that you got chat. There's a question in chat. Can we join a global grant ongoing between Rotary clubs from 2 other countries? Are there any issues with that?
Okay, if there's a grant that's already approved and a project that's underway and you want to join it, then you just have to ask them if you can help them. And they might say, sure, but you're not really going to be one of the partners. If there's a grant which is being developed, a project which is being developed, and you know one or both of the clubs that are working on it, you want to get involved, then you can. There are and every grant there have to be 2 partners, the primary partners, but other people can be a partner. We don't have that very often, but they're not one of the primary partners that actually signs on the bottom line as responsible for the grant. The 2, the international and the host clubs, if it's clubs, can also be districts, but those 2 entities have to be the ones primarily responsible. But for example, if they have another club nearby that wants to help, and they might help with fundraising, or they might help with implementation or inspection or something like that, then they would be listed on the grant application as a partner, but they're just not one of the primary ones. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that came from a person named Gore, so I don't know. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, with all of the people here, I can't always find the person who's asking the question. Anybody else? Anybody doing anything great this weekend? Where do I change my name? Ah, okay. All right, Mr. Gore. Right click on your picture and it'll say rename.
Did you see his note, Jim? So he doesn't.
That he didn't want to be a
WWE.
Yeah. Okay, maybe you have to right click on your name. That's possible. There's also 3 blue dots up in the right hand. Oh, Garrett Orr. I even know Garrett Orr. Okay. Garrett Orr is in Franklin County AM. Is that right?
Correct. He says you are right. You win $5. All right.
Oh, I don't know. 5 cents.
He didn't say $5. I did. Okay, a couple more minutes and we can start again. Is there any other questions for Jim before we get started?
Ron Apoon has a question.
Well, I have more of a comment. I want to follow up on something that Jim Goodrich put in the chat, and that is a suggestion that you really need to make sure that you get to know the people. And I know, Jim, in past trainings, we have talked about maybe starting with a small project, see how they do, whether it's club to club or a district grant. And then once you have confidence in them and you get to know each other better, then you can talk about, okay, what's the next step? What can we really do to have a huge impact in your district? So Jim, thank you. Jim Goodrich, thank you for putting that in the chat a while ago.
Yeah, I've suggested to a lot of people that if they, particularly in a district like ours, where we have plenty of district grant funds, if you find a partner and you want to start developing a relationship, you can do a district grant very quickly. And so it gives you a chance to work with them, and it might be helping to define your project, that district grant, something that that does a little pilot program or something like that. So you can get to know them and help define the project that you want to work on, so it's better. Janet, you have something? Your hand is raised, I think.
Okay, we can.
Not intentionally.
Oh.
I think you can lower it if you want to.
Okay, Jim, we can start again.
Okay. Now I need to go for 1 minute. I got a dog here that wants to be part of the presentation. Let's go.
Well, that was your dog. Ah. He was the only one that wasn't muted. I'm trying to figure out where that dog is coming from.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, so before you start, Mark, there's a Mark Linville asked, will you cover anything about the $2 million mega grant that is new, that is a new Rotary consideration?
I do know something about those. I've helped to apply for one. One of the most important things to do is to do a global grant first. They're looking for people who have experience with Rotary grants. And so you and your cooperating organization, your partners all need to have some experience with global grants. Ron, you have something?
Yeah, if I could add to that, Jim, Rotary International's first, program to scale grant was $2 million to do a malaria project. And one of the reasons why they got that grant is because they got another $4 million from 2 other partners. So it turned out to be a $6 million project. So they are really looking for big money with that. And so, Jim's right. You can't just jump into something brand new. It's got to be something you've been working on before.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get going again. Okay, so if you've got the global grant application, we're going to talk about how to complete it. Okay, it looks like a lot, but it's a lot of information, and you'll be surprised how much you already have, because we finished part 2, and I'm sure you were taking all kinds of notes as we went through part 2 and you got your project defined, so That's it. But talking to the grant staff member is a good thing to do. They'll help you. Down here, I've got grant staff contacts. This changes all the time. The grant staff is moving around depending on needs and personnel they have and all things like that. And so I always go to a new copy of that and talk to the person in the country where you want to have your project. Start with the online template. That's the one that I sent to you by email. And it's in the reference tab here. It's an editable Word document. If you work in the grant module, I've seen people get confused where when you go to review it, there's something in there that's not supposed to be there. It was from all of the fields are kind of small, so that you can see them on the screen. And so there'll be stuff that you don't see if you're just scanning through trying to see what's there. Anyway, the editable Word document is a pretty good tool to get started. It's easy to share. You can pass it around. And when you think you have alignment with your partners, then you can just kind of cut and paste out of the Word document to put it into the grant module where it's actually going to be approved. That's where you submit it and go through all of the funding and that sort of stuff. But I recommend that people start that way. Then there are 12 tabs, and we're gonna talk about most of these. It's the same. I guess they're tabs when you're in the grant module, and they're listed as steps 1 through 12 when you're looking at the Word document. So the first one is basic information. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is say, when you look at this thing, it's a Word document and you can delete stuff. And so you want to delete the fields you don't need because they end up being things that get you confused. For example, there are a lot of fields in steps 6, 7, and 10 related to vocational training teams. And there's even more fields related to scholarships. And none of those apply to a standard humanitarian grant. And if you start going through in the grant module or in the Word document and you get to one of these, you might think because it's asking you for travel information that you've got to go find out when you're going to go to the country where the project is. But that's not true. That's only there if it's a vocational training team or a scholarship where you actually have travel, which is paid by the project. And in most humanitarian grants, the grant doesn't pay for travel. So that field doesn't refer to you and you want to get it out of there so you don't answer it. It does two things. You waste your time answering it. And then if it ever gets into the submission, then the people who are reviewing your grant at the Rotary Foundation start to give you questions about the vocational training team that you can't answer because they think you're thinking about a vocational training team grant. So anyway, you really want to get those things out of there. And then what you do is you fill in all the ones that are easy. And you'd be surprised, 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, you can do most of those steps already because you did it in part 2 of this presentation. When you went through and said, where's it going to be? Who am I working with? Who are the beneficiaries? What area of focus? What are the goals? That's a tremendous amount of what you need. There's still lots more, but it's really a lot that you've got done. So you fill in those, and we'll go through a little bit just so you can see what we're doing. Then let's tell you what I'm going to do. Let's look at those. Share the grant application. Okay, can you see that? Okay, so we said basic information was one of the ones you could do. What type of project? You just put in humanitarian there. Primary host and international contacts. And so that might be you and your friend in this other country. You're going to be the primary contact for the grant, for the project. And then if you've got committee members, you can go ahead and put them down. Okay, host committee and international committee. And everybody always gets these confused. We think that the international committee must be the one that's overseas. But if the project is overseas, then that group is the host committee because they are the place where the project is. And we are the international committee. So this happens so much that people get that wrong. When you put it into the grants module, there's a little button you can click where it'll reverse them because everybody gets so tired of having to type it all over again. You put in a lot of information about your committee and then you find out they're on the wrong side. So you probably don't know about conflicts of interest yet because you haven't talked about it, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. Okay, project overview. You remember we wrote a little 2-sentence description of your project. You just cut and paste it right in here. They keep saying, try to be as concise as possible. We want you to put down the basics. What's your elevator speech about your project? And then which area of focus? And then you get to the goals. Okay, and we talked about goals and going through the area of focus guidelines and highlighting the places where you're going to be satisfying the goals. And those are the things you put in here. So so we're filling out a lot of stuff. Everybody get the idea that we've already got most of this stuff. Now, how are you going to measure it? You probably haven't done that yet. You might have thought about it, but there's this grant monitoring and evaluation plan supplement. So we'll come back and get that. Location and dates, you know where it's going to be. You probably know when it's going to be. You might end up changing that. And when it happens isn't cast in stone. Projects get delayed all the time. See, now we get to one of these that's a vocational training team thing. You want to just delete this right out of there if you don't have a vocational training team. Scholarship, you want to get rid of that. See, step 7, more vocational training team. So you just delete those sections and it's going to make this whole thing, instead of 11 pages, it's only going to be about 7 or 8 pages long. And it gets better. So, okay, so everybody get the idea with that? I'm going to go back to this. So then when you're in step 2, we talked about committee members. We put those in. Participants. Now that may be the cooperating organization. If you need technical expertise, like we talked about, somebody who speaks the language, or maybe somebody who really knows how to make sure when you're drilling a deep well that it's going to work, because you spend an awful lot of money on that deep well. You need somebody who really knows how to make it work. And there's going to be an MOU about that. Then there are other partners. When we were talking before about joining a club that already has 2 partners, this is one of the ways that you can be a partner. You can have some work that you do on the project and be listed as a partner in the participants section. And then I said you don't have travelers, but there are sometimes volunteer travelers that are specialists. And their travel can be paid for, and their expenses might be paid for depending on the circumstances. It was Bradley Sunrise. No, yeah, it was Bradley Sunrise who had a project in Togo, drilling a very large, very deep, very expensive well for a big community. And so they got Engineers Without Borders to be their volunteer traveler, and they were listed on the grant application. And in writing the grant application, you had to justify that they had the right expertise. And the Rotary Foundation will always ask, why isn't this expertise in the country where you're working? And so they had to show that in Togo, they didn't have these really, really deep wells. And they didn't have people with the experience at doing it and testing as they went along to make sure that everything was going to be okay. When you finally turned this thing on, the water was going to come out and it was going to be good water. And the guy who went over there to help them stayed several weeks to make sure that everything was right. Had to go back a couple of times, different times during the drilling. So sometimes those people are going to be really, really important to you. So then in step 7, the participants have to have an MOU. That's going to say, what does the host sponsor do? What does the international sponsor do? What does the cooperating organization do? There might be 1 or 2 cooperating organizations with different roles. And so you put that in there and everybody signs it. And it puts all of that down in an important document that's part of the contract. It's making sure that everybody knows what they're supposed to do. And this is a list of the host sponsor's responsibilities. It might not be exactly like this, because depending on the project, you could take some of these responsibilities and shift them to the international sponsor or to the cooperating organization. The project that my club did in Haiti, we didn't do the volunteer training because the volunteer training was all done in country by the cooperating organization. It wasn't either the host sponsor or the international sponsor. So anyway, so you got a list of host sponsor responsibilities and a list of international sponsor responsibilities. And again, you can shift these around, but these are things that you want to think about that have to get done.
Hey, Jim, when appropriate, Dr. Ahmed had a question about how important is sustainability.
Sustainability is very important. We're going to get to it in a minute or two. So let's just hold that until we get to sustainability. It's we got a couple of slides in here on sustainability. Okay, and the last one here about responsibilities is the cooperating organization. It's usually expertise, infrastructure, that sort of thing, supporting the grant itself. And the cooperating organization has to do things like agree that if there's ever an audit, they will cooperate with the audit. We report on what expenses they have, and they have to be available with their records to be audited on that kind of stuff. Okay, so what could go wrong? We would always say, oh, no, nothing could go wrong. It's so easy, right? But there's a lot of entities involved. There are things that could go wrong. So what do you think? What could go wrong? Anybody got any good ideas?
Foreign government involvement.
Yes, there are places where governments will sort of get in the way. When we shipped pump parts to Haiti, there were a lot of people who thought they should get paid because the pumps were arriving. Anyway, it's a challenge to deal with that kind of stuff. So yes, there are things like corruption that you have to worry about. There are things like timing not working the way you want it to. There are things like communications failing. A lot of things that could go wrong. You could have a financial overrun. It happens a lot.
Political unrest also.
Bonnie, say that again.
Political unrest.
Yes. COVID, that does it too. Yep.
We had that in Togo, I think, some political unrest there after
Yep.
the project was, yeah.
And those kinds of things, they're very challenging and very important. And the Rotary Foundation will tell you to do what you can to go fix it, because they want the project to be successful.
I think we've got one here. Janet says, war, earthquakes, and weather, major participants become unable to participate. Another one, parts got stolen.
What was the last one, Greg?
Parts got stolen.
Oh, parts getting stolen. Yeah, yeah. I've heard of projects where the well driller, who was getting most of the money, got partway through and took the money and ran because he thought he was going to run out, and he just disappeared. Right? And you got to find a way to overcome that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but you got to be prepared for those kind of contingencies. Okay, conflict of interest. Does your club have potential conflicts of interest? We could have a poll here, but we're not. I'm going to tell you that most people say, oh no, our heart is pure. We don't have a conflict of interest. All clubs have potential conflicts of interest. Always, always. You got to scratch the surface and find out where they are, and then you can take care of them. But you always have to think really hard about conflicts of interest. You identify them by talking to the members of your club or the people who are in the cooperating organization, the members of the club that's the host club. There's much more likely to be a conflict in the host club than there is in the international club, but there can be in either. And it's easy to see if you think about just a simple project. Your club is going to plant shrubs around the school across the street. And so you talk to the principal about what shrubs they need or what they would like. And then one of your club members says, well, I run a nursery and I'll give them to you at a great price. Okay, now that's a conflict of interest. Doesn't mean you aren't going to buy them from him, but you better be careful, because you might end up with shrubs that are too small or not the right kind, or too expensive or something, and you're going to be trying to dig yourself out of a hole. So you got to make sure that you manage that. And there are always ways to manage it. You know, just make sure that you do. You can control them quite often. In the example of a person in your club who has a conflict of interest, then you control them pretty much by making sure that that person doesn't have any financial project responsibility. He may be somebody who works on the project, and he may provide some stuff for the project, but you have other people who decide whether they want to buy it. They don't have to buy it from him. So that's how you work those things out. And asking and making sure your partner club doesn't have conflicts of interest is really important. So you put that in step 2. And if you have a potential conflict of interest, I suggest that you put that down and say, this is how we control it, rather than just saying no, because they really want to know that you've thought about it. And if you say, well, we have 2 people with the potential conflict of interest, but they're not on our project team and they're not controlling the finances of the project, so we think it's under control. So that finishes step 2. Then you got to develop a project plan. Start putting down all the steps you know. This might be several pages long. You'll use it a couple of places. There are places where you're going to put project steps in the grant itself, in the grant application, and they'll ask you for an abbreviated set of steps. They won't want fundraising and submitting the application and things like that. They want the work steps in the middle, you know. But in fact, when you make an overall plan, you're interested in all of that, from getting the agreement with your partner that you're going to do this, all the way through to writing the closing report at the end, and following up a year later with a big celebration where everybody goes back and has a party and they pay for it all themselves. All of that stuff is not really part of, some of that's not part of the project, but you want to put it down in your plan with lots of details in the middle. It just kind of gets your head clear about what you got to do. So what has to be in this? What elements are in there? Throw some things in the chat. What are the things that you have to include in the project plan? If I don't stop sharing, I can't see what goes in the chat. Training, monitoring, auditing. Yep. There's a lot of reporting you need to do. And if you're going to do reporting, you're going to need to do things like take pictures. And you might have somebody who's going and he comes back and you say, well, we're about to write a progress report. Do you have any pictures? And he said, no, I didn't take my camera, you know? So you got to plan for those things. Otherwise you might find yourself without any pictures or without any notes about what happened. Okay. So if you got a plan, then we're going to go forward. Okay, sustainability. Somebody asked about sustainability, right? It's it really is important. You can think of sustainability several ways. When we finish the project, will the equipment that we put in or the whatever structures that we have something that does something, will it keep running after we're gone, after the project's finished? And another part of sustainability is sustainability of the workforce that did this. And sometimes you can think in that term about how this group can do this again. Once they've learned how to do a project, now they can fairly easily pick up and do another project. And that's another kind of sustainability. The people who are on this project, the team that you have, the outside people that helped you, being able to do multiple projects is a lot easier than just doing the first one. So, so think of sustainability several ways. You want to keep the ball rolling. Okay, so you start with the community assessment, look for the strengths in the community. Make sure the community is involved in the project. You want to respect natural resources because particularly in developing countries, very large parts of the population are absolutely 100% dependent on natural resources. And so you might think, oh, well, I don't really care if the river is polluted. I'll just go to Walmart and buy me a case of water, right? Well, they can't buy a case of water. They have to get their water out of the river. So you have to be careful. What is what's the natural resource that's close to where you're working? And are you doing anything to harm it? You really have to be careful. Train the beneficiaries. You want them to understand everything you did. And if you do, then that helps with the project going forward. You want to use local labor if you can, and you want to buy locally, even if it costs a little bit more. If you can buy parts locally, then that means that in the future, people who need to replace something, they know where to go to find the parts. So you want to buy locally, use local labor, train people how to do this, whatever it is that you're doing. Establish a maintenance plan and train a monitoring group. It might be a person, it might be a whole group that that knows how to see whether things are working right and call for the maintenance plan if you need it. So there's a slide here on 6 steps to sustainability that'll give you a slightly different view, but it's the same basic things. You need to think about what you have to do. Jim Goodrich, do you have something? Push down your space bar.
Yes, one of the reasons that I don't have a space bar. Oh, how about that?
Okay,
right,
that's good.
All right. One of the reasons that this process is becoming more and more complex is about 10 years ago that the Rotary Foundation made a discovery that over 50% of the wash projects being installed by Rotarians failed within 5 years. So that's why the word sustainable is such an important element. And one of the things that I've heard they're pushing, and I've experienced it, is they want you to hang out for more than one project for more than 1 year, go on to the next step of health or something like that, so that you can kind of keep an eye on, especially the technical projects like a water well, and make sure that everything does progress as you thought it might. Because boy, Murphy's Law bites you every time if you don't keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and you want to make sure you have people there that know how to solve the problems and know that they have the authority to do so. There are lots of places where when something breaks, people just say it broke and they expect somebody to come back and fix it. And that's really not right. You want the people who see it to have the capability, at least to call the right place to get it to happen, so that they're part of the solution. Okay, stewardship. Everybody know what stewardship is? Okay, who's the person or the group that's responsible for project funds and successful completion? That's stewardship in a nutshell. And who is that? You all should know. The 2 primary partners, they're the ones who are responsible. They are, if all the funds disappear, they're responsible for replacing them. If the project doesn't get completed, they're responsible for completing it and making it work. And yeah, okay, if a hurricane comes through, then is the Rotary Foundation going to give you a break? Well, maybe, maybe, but they still want you to be responsible. So how do you exercise responsibility?
Hey, Jim, we have a question here. Does the district have a means to control the flow of funds for wiring funds internationally and obtaining currency exchange rates?
Rotary International does. Generally, when you have a project, if you're going to spend the money in another country besides the US, then you set up a bank account in that country, and the Rotary Foundation wires the money directly there. The Rotary Foundation has a lot of concern about banking systems that aren't very good. And if you work in some areas, we've had a couple of clubs that were working in South Sudan, and there was a lot of concern about the banking systems there because they were controlled by some of the groups that were doing the fighting. And so there were all kinds of restrictions about sending money and making sure it gets to the right place and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's there's plenty of that. The district, we are not experts in that, but the Rotary Foundation, Rotary International, they are. Okay, contingency planning. This is one of the critical things about stewardship. What do you do if you have a financial overrun? What do you do if you have reporting issues? What do you do if you have a communication problem? These three questions come up because they're three things that happen quite often. You can design your project so that it has some capability of taking care of financial overruns. You can have contingency funds, and you can also have a project which is somewhat elastic. If you're doing something that's repetitive, let's say you're building latrines, you can write a project to build 100 latrines, and if it turns out that they're more expensive, then you can modify your project and just build 90. And that's okay. You're still doing what the project wanted to do. You just have to plan that if you start to have a financial overrun, then this is the way you would adjust your project. It can happen very easily, right? The exchange rate changes, and when the exchange rate changes, then everything looks more expensive or less. So, okay, reporting issues. You expect your partner to tell you what's going on, and someday they stop telling you. What does that mean? You can't get pictures, or things aren't going the way you thought they were going to. And here we are, we're in phase 2, but we're still doing some stuff back in phase 1, that sort of thing. So you've got a plan for what you're going to do there. And this thing about communication problems is, if you have a financial problem or if you have a reporting problem, you almost always have a communication problem. Communication problems are quite often a sign of some underlying problem that you haven't heard about yet. And so that means that you want to have multiple ways of communicating. If you're working in another country, there are all kinds of ways you can. This is why you have very good personal relationships to begin with your partner. Get to really know them, so that when if you get them on the phone or you're talking to them by WhatsApp, you can say, what's happening with you? And they'll actually tell you, that, okay, I had a death in the family. My house fell down because we had a hurricane. There's all kinds of things I'm worried about. I'm not worried about this project now. And at least then you know what the issue is. Get backup communication practices in place. If your club and the other club are both Rotary clubs, then they both have assistant governors and district governors. And so you can set up communications between the assistant governors and the district governors, so that they know that this project is going on. And if somebody if our district governor calls the district governor in the other country and says, we haven't been able to hear anything about our project, do you know if anything is going on there? Then the district governor or the assistant governor can just go drop in and see what's happening. And it's not so threatening. You have ways of kind of loosening things up. So you want to have backup ways of reporting, backup ways of communicating. Any questions about that? Okay, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. This is another part of stewardship. How do you monitor it? And you need to plan this. Is it going to be by observations or verbal reports, data? How are you going to be able to do this? That's going to help you in defining how you measure, how do you evaluate it? Who's going to do it? And this best practice at the bottom, try to link your reporting to events, not to the calendar. The Rotary International says you have 12 months after you get the first payment in order to write your first report. But what you want to do is put your report on phases of the project rather than on the calendar. So if 3 months in, you're going to order your primary pieces of equipment for whatever project it is, then at the end of that 3 months, you want to write a report and say, we ordered this equipment. It cost a little more or a little less than we thought. We ended up having to change some equipment because some of it was improved. And so we got the new improved version of something. Whatever it is, you just define that phase as a place where you're going to do reporting. And you can have events in your calendar, in your plan, where you're going to report. And now you're not under so much pressure to get that report out because the 12 months is clicking away. It makes sense? Okay, measuring success. This is in step 5. There's standard measures and then there's special measures. And you go to the monitoring and evaluation plan, and for each goal, there will be standard measures that you can use. And they may make perfect sense to you. And so you select those standard measures and you pick the ranges and that sort of thing of where you expect the measures to come out. And then think about sustainability, contingency, other things that you want to measure that aren't in those standard measures. And one of the things that I would suggest is related to water. If you're putting in sanitation systems, then one of the things that the water and sanitation area of focus suggests is that you strive to have an area where you're working where they don't have open defecation, to get it so that everybody in the area is using toilets, as opposed to, well, 90% of the people are, but we got 10% of the people who are still relieving themselves out behind their house somewhere. And that you don't get all of the benefits if you do that. And you also aren't as sustainable as if you get the whole community doing this. I've seen communities where they have a big sign at the entrance to the community that says, we're a poop-free zone. Don't go and do your business in our ditches. If you want to use one of our latrines, you can use one of our latrines. But this is the way we work here. They're really proud of that. And it really helps you. So you can put a measure in that project. If you say, well, what's the primary measure? Well, we're going to build 100 latrines. Well, what's this extra measure? We're going to have 2 villages that we're working in with these 100 latrines, and we're going to get each of them to be an open defecation-free zone or a poop-free zone. And that then becomes a very important measure that helps your sustainability and really gives you something to strive for. So anyway, you'll probably find others where you say, well, why don't we have a goal on this? The reason you have these standard measures is that the Rotary Foundation, with the standard measures, tries to add them up through all of the projects, so that they can then report on an international basis. Here's how many water systems we put in. Here's how many people we helped. Here's how many latrines we built. Here's how many people we helped. And they do that because people use standard measures. It's easier to roll them all up together. So this grant monitoring and evaluation plan, that's a pretty good document, easy to run through in order to get your measures right. Then you got to have a budget. And I think we all know about budgets, but these are the categories. It's not that hard to break things down into these things. But you'll end up with a budget for what you're going to do. And I'm not going to go through all of the details of how to do that. We're all pretty well trained in that kind of stuff. Any questions about the budgets? You can have a contingency. That's part of the budget. You can have stuff on project management. Okay, funding. Now, how are you going to get the money? I told you not to worry about that, right? And so you didn't worry about that. And now you're to the point where you got to figure out what where you're going to get the money. So I want to ask you, does your district, that's the same as my district, does your district have as many global grants as it wants? The answer is no. We would love to have more global grants. Next, does your district have funds available for more global grants? Yes, we do. We're a very generous district and we give a lot of money to the Rotary Foundation, and that's how the funding comes back. So we have funds available for global grants. So where can you get additional funding? Well, you can get it from your district. Now, we have a formula for how much you get, and you got to raise some money and all that kind of stuff. Don't take no for an answer. If you've got a good project, we're going to fund it. And we're going to find a way to get it if we don't have it. We've got people like Ron Apoon, who's on here. All of our district leaders know people in other districts. We help people with other projects. They will help us with ours. And so if you don't have sufficient funding, that's not a problem. That's something we're going to work on. Any questions about that? Okay. We're going to do a funding exercise. We'll see how this works. Okay. You're working on a global grant, creating a water well for an orphanage in Sierra Leone. Project budget is $45,000. Your club has raised $7,000. Your district foundation chair will match club cash 2-to-1. Another district has contributed $5,000 to your global grant project. A Rotarian from another club has given her Paul Harris Society contribution. Everybody know what the Paul Harris Society is? Okay, this is a person, if you don't, Paul Harris Society is a group of people. We have over 100 of them in our district who have agreed to contribute $1,000 every year to the Rotary Foundation. And those people, they can give it to the World Fund. They can give it to the SHARE program. So it comes back in parts of it's in our district grants. That's the thing that most people give it to. But you can also designate it for a particular project. And so this person says that she likes your project so much that that she's going to contribute her $1,000 this year to your global grant. So you got $1,000 there. Now the World Fund is going to match DDF at 0.8-to-1, but they don't match cash. So here's the question. Do you have enough funding to submit the grant? What do you think? Okay, let's add them up. What's the first number you got? It says your club has $7,000. Okay, so you got $7,000. Now your district foundation chair is going to match the club cash. That's $7,000, that's cash. And it's going to go to the foundation. Your district foundation chair is going to match it 2-to-1. $14,000. Don't have enough yet. Another district has contributed $5,000 to your global grant. Okay, we maybe helped you get that. But okay, so there's $5,000. Then you got this Rotarian from another club that gave her Paul Harris Society contribution. That's $1,000. Okay, now this gets a little tricky. The World Fund will match DDF at 0.8-to-1, but not cash. So what math do we do here now? What are we getting from the World Fund? Anybody know? How do you find out what you're getting from the World Fund?
16,000.
Okay, now how'd you get 16,000?
I took the 20,000 that I added up. If I added this right, I can't read my writing very well. Of the 7 for the club, 14 for the district, so that's 21. And then 5 from second district, so that's 26. And then the Paul Harris would be 27. Oh, okay.
Okay, and see all of that, the key word in this sentence is DDF. And Janet, you might not know what DDF is, but that's district designated funds.
Oh,
and district designated funds are what you get from the district foundation chair and the other district. So the 14,000 and the 5,000, those are both district designated funds. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take 8/10 of 19,000, and you're probably all better at this than I am, but I think that's 15,200. When I did it before, I was wrong, and Greg told me it was 15,200. So yeah. Anyway, so 15,200, that's the amount you're getting from the World Fund. All of this kind of all rolls up. And now if you add that up, I think that's time to add it up. You don't have enough. You wanted 45,000, you got 42,200. Okay, so what are you gonna do if you don't have enough?
Call Jim Roxlow.
Have a fundraiser.
Okay, those are two very good things. Because if you have a fundraiser, you might put in another 1,000, right? And if you put in another 1,000 up here from your fundraiser, then that means that your district is going to give you more. You put in 8,000 here and you get 16,000 here. And that 16,000 is going to give you more down here, right? And so maybe another $1,000 is enough. And if you call Jim Roxlow, he just might have a suggestion for you that, well, I see what you're doing here, and you told me you put in 7,000, so I promised you 14,000 in DDF. And I thought that was pretty generous. But now that I look at all of this stuff you've got, this $1,000, this is from another club. Is that another club in our district? Well, if it is another club in our district, then our district can match that too. So you can get another $2,000 in the DDF matching here, which then gives you another about $3,000. No, about $3,000, 3,500 total, because you get that and 0.8 of it down here. Okay, so any of those things, if you do a $1,000 project, or you say this $1,000 is inside the district, then you'll find yourself a little bit over $45,000. And what if you then went back and you said, well, we had a change and now it's not $45,000, it's $60,000. Are you going to quit?
No.
Don't do it. Don't do it. I'll tell you not to do it. Because if you need another $15,000, we might not have it, but we'll go to other districts. Just like we found a district that gave us 5,000, we'll find 3 more districts to give us 5,000. Magic. It's magic. Okay. All right. Approval. This is once you get all of that stuff straight, then you get everything the way you want it. And the 2 primary contacts, those people back on tab 1, it might be you and your good buddy who's in that other country. You review it and you approve it, and the application gets locked. Okay. That says you can't change it anymore. Well, you can change a couple of things, but pretty much it's locked. Then all of the contributing districts, the district governor and the Rotary Foundation chair, for all of the districts that are putting in money, they have to approve the money that they're putting in. The lead districts, both of them have to review for compliance. They have to sign this little thing that says, as far as I can tell, I looked at everything and it meets all of the rules of the Rotary Foundation. And there are plenty. There are plenty of rules. Then it becomes submitted. The partners have to sign to say they accept the responsibility. That's a little legal document. It gets reviewed. There's always questions. You might do a revision. You might just answer the questions. And then eventually it gets approved. As soon as it's approved, then you're going to set up your bank. And you probably want to do that before you get to this stage, because just a few weeks after it's approved, if your banking instructions are all set up, then the Rotary Foundation is going to just zap and send the money into your bank account. And all of a sudden, this is not like a district grant where you do the work and then you get reimbursed afterwards. The Rotary Foundation gives you the money up front. So for a project that's like $45,000, they will send you the whole $45,000. If you got one that's $300,000, they'll probably break it into phases and give you different parts as you go along, so that they don't have as much money outstanding. Okay. Any questions? I think we're through early. Horrors. Okay, so I'll be glad to answer your questions, but I got one question for you. What are you gonna do with what you've learned about global grants? Think about that. Are you gonna get one? Are you gonna call me and ask for more ideas? Any of that's okay. If you're going to go to your neighboring clubs and see if they want to go in on something with you, that's okay too. But think about what you're going to do. And here's some people who can help you. So I'll even give you my phone number and everybody else's phone number too. Okay, now we got a poll for you at the end. Greg, do you want to launch that poll?
You see it, Jim?
No.
You don't see it?
I don't see it. I think I closed it when I closed my.
No, it's people are answering it.
Okay.
Got half the people so far.
I don't see it at all.
Well,
Somebody doesn't see the poll?
30 people have seen it so far. 31 have seen it. So
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. I had the problem the other day. Some people couldn't see it. So, all right, I'm going to end the poll, Jim.
Okay.
You see the results, Jim?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. This is pretty good. Most of you, or the most common thing is, I understand the process and I know what to do. And the main thing is get started and don't be discouraged. There's plenty of challenges, but there's lots of resources and people ready to help you. And I'll stay on for a few minutes and answer any questions if anybody has them. You can unmute yourself and we'll just turn it into a little free-for-all. So I want to thank you all. You'll all get a copy of the slides. If you need anything else, just let me know. And any of you who want to comment on what parts were confusing or anything like that, I'd like more information on this or that, feel free to send that to me. I'd like to know, because we'll probably be doing this again soon.
Thank you, Jim. It was outstanding.
You're welcome, Bonnie. Come back again. I think you've been here before.
Yes, I have. But I always learn something every time.
Okay. One of these days you might be teaching it.
May I ask a question, please, sir?
Yes.
You've talked about the water projects, and I'm familiar with them. How do they differentiate from environmental projects? I'm just curious as to what falls in the environmental area as compared to the water specific.
Okay, and the key there is looking at the focus area goals. If you go to that document, and it's one of the ones in here that I showed you one page of it that was the one related to water, but if you that thing is like 11 or 12 pages long, and it'll have a description of each of the areas and what the goals are. Okay. And you will see that the goals for water and sanitation and the goals for the environment are different.
All right.
And so you can say, when I'm doing this project, I'm going to affect both of those things. But in general, you're going to want to pick one or the other.
All right. Thank you.
And remember, I said, start with a yellow highlighter and go through the whole 12 pages and just highlight the things that sound like your project. That's going to tell you which area you're in. That's the way to do it.
Can I ask you something, Jim?
Sure, Rachel.
Since environment is new, have you had any approved yet for environment, and what were they?
I haven't. And it's going to be interesting as we, looking back on what happened when we first started with the areas of focus. Mm-hmm. Some of you have been around long enough. It's been 8 years now, something like that. Anyway, at first, you can be pretty sure that the trustees are going to stick very, very close to the guidelines they put out there. Okay. You better be doing something that's right in line with the goals they have, because what they're doing is trying to set the goals for what, and they've got some idea of how many projects they're going to have and how much money that it's going to cost, because they've got a budget for all of this stuff. And if it turns out that they get way too many projects or not enough, then they'll adjust what those goals look like.
Okay.
Okay, but at first they're going to kind of hold them, and that's what we've seen with other areas when they come along. But every few years they will adjust them. There'll be something that they add to it, like in the water and sanitation. It didn't have hygiene in there at first, but now that's really dominant, because if you don't do hygiene training, then the water and sanitation projects aren't so sustainable.
Yeah, I see. That's good. So we'll watch and kind of watch it happen. And
yeah, it's gonna be a changing, growing field for us, the environment.
I'm just so glad it happened.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for this great night. It was good.
Jim, I have an answer to that last question on WASH and environment.
Okay.
Where they sort of cross the line, for example, you're going to be drilling a water well, for example, and you're in a watershed, and your watershed may have points of contamination that you may want to clean up first. Right. So you'd run an environmental project to clean up points of contamination, and then come back in and assess where you're going to put your well so it's out of harm's way from that potential contamination. So what used to be, you would have done that contamination remediation under a WASH project. Now it's being done under an environmental project.
Yep.
Okay.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I hope you all have a good night, and send me your questions or comments, and I'll be glad to get back to you.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, great. Bye.